Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Marta Hernandez, Executive Director of Californians Together, and I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Toward 2030, a grounded call for action to strengthen California's bilingual teacher pipeline. On behalf of Californians Together, I am truly honored to welcome educators and advocates, higher education partners, district leaders, and bilingual teacher educators from across the state who are deeply committed to advancing multilingual education and supporting California's multilingual learners. At Californians Together, our vision is for schools and communities that value, affirm, and build upon the linguistic and cultural assets students bring with them, ensuring that multilingualism and biliteracy become a signature feature of education in California. Our mission is to champion the educational success of multilingual learners through advocacy, leadership development, coalition building, and policy change. Today's webinar speaks directly to that mission. As California continues moving towards the goals of Global California 2030, we have much to celebrate. The growth in bilingual teacher authorizations, the expansion of dual language programs, and the increasing recognition of multilingualism as an asset all reflect years of advocacy, commitment, and collective effort. At the same time, this new report reminds us with honesty and urgency that the work is far from complete. Toward 2030, a grounded call for action to strengthen California's bilingual teacher pipeline not only celebrates important progress, but also elevates the voices of those doing the daily work of sustaining bilingual teacher preparation programs across California. By centering the experiences of bilingual authorization coordinators, this report sheds light on the structural barriers, institutional challenges, and the policy gaps that continue to limit the growth of a robust and sustainable bilingual teacher workforce. Importantly, the report does not stop at naming challenges. It offers 5 clear recommendations for strengthening California's multilingual education infrastructure and calls upon all of us to move from aspiration to action. This conversation could not be more timely. California's multilingual students deserve educators who are prepared, supported, and valued. The future of multilingual education depends on whether we are willing to invest in the systems, partnerships, and policies necessary to meet this moment. We are deeply, deeply grateful to the California Association for Bilingual Teacher Educators, the authors, researchers, contributors, and all of the bilingual authorization coordinators whose voices and experiences shaped this important work. Thank you for being here and for continuing to lead, advocate, and push this work forward. I am excited for today's conversation and honored to now introduce the CABTE President, Clara Amador Landstrom. Clara?
Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much for that introduction. On behalf of the California Association for Bilingual Teacher Education, CABTE, welcome to our seminar, welcome to our webinar on Toward 2030, a grounded call for action to strengthen California Bilingual Teacher Pipeline. I am delighted to have you join us this morning. This has been a work of passion from our organization to better understand and learn what the current situation is with the bilingual teacher education pipeline. My name is Clara Amador Langster, and I am currently the president of CABTE. CABTE as an organization unifies the bilingual teacher educators across the state to advocate advocate for linguistically and culturally diverse learners. Our organization is an advocate and a fighter to promote for the promotion of biliteracy programs and strengthening teacher preparation programs and foster the collaboration among teacher educators and faculty and researchers and the community at large. We are excited today to present the findings of our research that started back in September of last year. And we have taken into consideration that where the field is in terms of our understanding and our actions moving forward for the future. I am a co-PI for this research project, and with me is our research team. So I would like to ask Dana to introduce herself as a member of our research team. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you for that, Clara. Yes, I'm Dana Baldwin Moreno. I'm a retired lecturer and supervisor from the University of California, Santa Cruz, where I had the privilege of observing, coaching, and evaluating bilingual and monolingual student teachers. And before that, I spent 3 decades in K-5 classrooms as a teacher, both bilingual and of regular students. With that, I'd like to recognize Dr. Nirmala Griarte Flores.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dana, for that. My name is Nirmala Griarte Flores from Cal Poly Pomona, assistant professor, also a bilingual coordinator at our education department. And now I want to hand it over to our PI, Dr. Eduardo Muñoz Muñoz.
Thank you, Nemla. Good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes, todo el mundo. It's a real pleasure to be here, as Clara mentioned, crowning the effort of more than 1 year of researching what is going on with the bilingual teacher pipeline that we also want to thrive. My name is Eduardo Muñoz, and I'm an associate professor at San Jose State University, where I also proudly serve as a bilingual faculty. And I have served as a principal investigator for this research project that we are presenting to you today. We are going to have a webinar organized in the following way. So first, we are going to give you a context and a sense of what are the origins, the genesis of this project, the needs that we have, which is very familiar to you. Then we are going to move about what's in place. Let's celebrate what we can count on our side. That will not preclude us from moving into naming some of the issues that are still hurting in getting the bilingual pipeline thriving and being splendorous. Then we will move into agency. As we have spoken to bilingual coordinators across the state, we are going to discuss how people feel empowered to start promoting the change, which is the energy that we want to channel into our final section for the webinar, section 5, with our 5 policy recommendations. That said, first, we want to contextualize this report that we are presenting today as part of the work of the California Association for Bilingual Teacher Education, but also emphasizing the positionality that our organization has. Essentially, we have a distinct position inside the pipeline, as the members of our organizations are the ones that are preparing the bilingual educators of the present and the future. We bring together faculty, researchers, and advocates. That means there is a passion, there is a systematicity in the thought about how we collect and analyze data, and then we do the work day in, day out in our institutions. This is a collective of university faculty and district leaders that are shaping bilingual teacher education statewide. Therefore, we consider that the fact that we are bringing up this research is the outcome of being in quite a vantage point to be able to say what we are going to say. What we studied, the commonalities and trends across bilingual teacher preparation programs in California. Given the dearth of data that we have in terms of where people are, which is one of our needs in the state, we really wanted to go and talk to as many as possible among the around 50 programs that we have in California, very targeted sample. So our evidence base for the claims that you hear today are going to be 45 interviews, 35 coordinators, and 10 state level leaders. And then we reinforce this with four focus groups and a coordinator survey. But getting more into detail about how the methods came into play, Clara, tell us, how did we do this work?
So this was a really interesting research project in that we had a multi-phase mixed methods approach. As co-researchers representing the CSU system, the UC system, and private nonprofit independent, we were able to really look at a multi-phase study. So we had the first phases 1 and 2, which obviously included the completion of 35 interviews with bilingual authorization coordinators across the state and again across CSU, UC, and private IHEs. We also complemented that with 10 interviews with state level leaders and advocacy organizations. So that was our first of 2 phases. Phase 3 included additional focus groups and survey, as Eduardo had just mentioned. So we conducted 4 focus groups with about 17 bilingual coordinators for member validation of findings. And we conducted a survey of about 19 coordinators with a Likert open-ended scale iterative thematic analysis. So we really did have a full view of what this was going to be about in terms of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. That's why it took us a little bit of time, right, to get to where we are today. So we're going to start with section 1, the challenge. And I believe it's Nirmala. Nirmala is going to go help us talk about the challenge. Thank you, Nirmala.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Clara. Now let's talk about why Global California 2030 matters right now. So as we all know, Global California 2030 is California's statewide initiative to expand multilingualism and prepare students for a global society. And we know also that the vision is very ambitious. Why? Because by 2030, half of California students will participate in programs leading to proficiency in 2 or more languages by 2040, 3 of 4 students will participate in programs leading to proficiency in 2 or more languages. And on paper, we look good. We've made progress. In 2014 to 15, California issued 617 bilingual authorizations. Okay, however, by 2023 to 2024, that number grew to 1,370, and that is real movement. So we also know that Proposition 58 in 2016 reignited dual language immersion expansion across the state. Why? Because districts began reopening doors that had long been closed to bilingual education. But here's the tension that we need to sit and grapple with. California set a target of 90 bilingual teacher preparation programs by 2025. But the reality is that we are at 48. When we look more closely, the gaps become even more sobering. For Spanish bilingual teachers, there are roughly 240 students for every 1 bilingual authorization issued. And for Vietnamese, it jumps to more than 2,200 students per authorization. And for Punjabi, over 11,000 students per authorization. And nearly 40% of California's K through 12 students are multilingual learners or come from multilingual backgrounds. Yet our educator pipeline is nowhere near aligned with the linguistic reality of our schools. So the question is, can we build the systems fast enough to sustain the promise? Because the clock is ticking toward 2030. So now I'd like to hand it over to Dana to talk about what works now, and specifically the assets in the pipeline. Dana?
We'll need to advance to the next slide. And the one after that. Thank you. Thank you, Nirmala. What assets? What works now? Let's emphasize that there have been successes to date. We are growing the bilingual pipeline. Since 2018, bilingual authorization programs in institutes of higher education have increased from 40 to 48 in 2025. Also, grant programs are helping. The Los Angeles Teacher Preparation Pathway is an example that was cited by interviewees. The LATPP provides a mechanism for paraeducators to become credentialed with bilingual authorization. Additionally, local education agencies, LEAs, are also playing a role growing the bilingual teacher pipeline. The BTPDP, the Bilingual Teacher Professional Development Program, has provided LEAs with up to $20 million to support paras and credentialed teachers in receiving bilingual authorization. As of 2024, 6 LEAs were awarded funding for this purpose. Quality and access. Another success has been the increase in quality and access to bilingual authorization programs. Bilingual teacher performance expectations, the BTPEs, have been updated and revised. These, hand in hand with ongoing CTC accreditation, have added a greater depth of rigor and accountability to BILA programs. CSET 3 is no longer the only measure of target language competency for entry into BILA programs. Local language assessments allow teacher candidates to grow and show language proficiency through portfolio and project-based assessments and other means. Additionally, I wanted to add that access to BILA programs has been enhanced by online options. These have bridged the constraints of geography. Now assets expanding demand and infrastructure. California has begun to transition from English-only instruction to multilingual expansion. Being bilingual and multilingual is being seen as something to be proud of. There is a growing demand for bilingual education. 75,000 plus seals of biliteracy obtained by students in the state of California are representative of this trend. Numbers of DLI, dual language programs, continue to grow and have more than doubled since Proposition 58. Partnerships and investments are backing bilingual teacher development. Regionally, many LEA and university partnerships have been built. These support program growth and help provide quality classroom placements for student-teacher fieldwork. Recognizing the shortage of bilingual teachers of Asian languages, the governor's $5 million grant is an investment that has helped accredit bilingual teachers who can teach in languages such as Vietnamese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, and Tagalog. Section 3, name the barriers, break the barriers. I'd like to hand this off to Clara Amador Langster to fill us in.
Thank you. Thank you, Dana, for that. So this is section 3, name the barriers, break the barriers, right? We identified several barriers and several structural challenges throughout our entire interview process. The first thing that we found is that there is a fragile staffing structure that is resting on one coordinator or one bilingual coordinator per campus, oftentimes non-tenure, and most of the times with no release time and responsible for all the management of a bilingual authorization. So a fragile staffing model is definitely something we need to look at as a structural challenge. Additionally, our bilingual authorizations are treated as add-ons and they're not treated as full credentials. Because they're add-ons, they are marginalized, they're looking as peripheral and tangential, and they're not given the type of attention in terms of personnel, in terms of staffing, in terms of funding, because they are add-ons, they are authorizations that are added on top of a base credential, as we all know, multiple subject, single subject, or ed specialists. In the area of structural challenges, we also found affordability and clinical placement gaps as two important areas to really zero in. The first thing is that candidates cannot afford unpaid student teaching for 600 hours. Undocumented students face much more barriers than that. But even just candidates that are completing a bilingual student teaching, they cannot afford to be unpaid for 16 weeks, 18 weeks, or 20 weeks, depending on the IHE. That creates a problem of access. We also have a real challenge with the clinical placement gaps. Placement scarcity forces English-only student teaching. So just in my organization alone, just in my university alone, we are having a real problem placing single subject bilingual authorization candidates because we don't have access to the placements that will have a qualified bilingual university support provider and a qualified bilingual site support provider. So that is definitely a challenge that we found all around the state, the scarcity of placements that are appropriate and vetted for bilingual teacher candidates, especially in the single subject secondary setting. Additionally, we actually found that language proficiency is absolutely right now considered and identified as a gatekeeper for incoming bilingual teacher candidates. CISE Subtest 3 blocks heritage speakers that are fluent in Spanish but lacking written literacy. I myself took the CISE 3 because I wanted to know what my students were being asked to do, and we know that there is a need to really have an audit on that particular measure as a gatekeeper. Additionally, when we're looking at Asian language CSET, oh my goodness, that poses a parallel barrier for Mandarin, Vietnamese, Korean, and Filipino candidates. So both CSET Subtest 3 in Spanish and CSET Subtest 3 in Asian languages are both barriers for our incoming bilingual teacher candidates, and we need to conduct an audit and an overhaul of the CSET Subtest 3. Additionally, we have structural challenges that go to the notion of funding, data, and political volatility. In terms of funding, we know that in many cases we have episodic grants only that are funded for one particular occasion and then they're not renewed. There is no sustainability and there's no structural funding for programs over time or for candidates over time, creating a tremendous volatility in the ability to really grow and develop strong, robust programs. The data at the state level is highly fragmented, and political volatility disrupts the continuity when we have also very, fragmented data systems. So those are some of the challenges, some of the barriers that we're facing, and I would like for Nirmala to take on Section 4, Unlock the Agency that already exists in our system.
Thank you, Clara. So now that we've heard the structural changes, let's find out how we can unlock the agency that already exists. So let me paint a picture here. One thing we've noticed across CSU bilingual programs is that coordinator agency is really underutilized. Coordinators are doing the major work, curriculum design, candidate recruitment, community partnerships, but they're often disconnected from state level policy conversations. And a lot of them are working in isolation. In some cases, Bilingual coordinators at different campuses don't even regularly communicate with one another, even though they're navigating very similar challenges. And some of us here can relate to that. So meanwhile, state leaders and advocacy organizations already hold coalition power. They have relationships with legislators, access to policy networks, and the ability to shape statewide initiatives. And that is where CABTE comes in, becomes more important. CABTE, okay, where we are all proud to be part of, CABTE can serve as the bridge between coordinator expertise and coalition power. CABTE creates a structure where coordinators can move from isolated program leaders to a more connected statewide voice. This allows us their lived program knowledge to inform advocacy, legislation, and system-wide collaboration. So the goal isn't just networking, it's about building collective influence. I'd like to hand it over now to Eduardo to talk more about how a timeline would look like where we can unlock the agency that already exists. Eduardo?
Thank you, Nirmala. Essentially, we need to develop, we have a lot of goodwill, good intention, and a lot of effort and a lot of muscle built up. But we cannot go around the fact that financial support for bilingual teacher candidates is first and foremost the one single leverage that can actually make a difference. And this would go from tuition waivers to monthly stipends, because right now, what we are counting is on lots of people who are honoring their own tradition, their own multicultural or multilingual views of the world as part of why they would want to become bilingual teachers. But there's also an element, and this is framed in the whole context of the teacher shortage in general, where if you are going to make an effort, is it going to pay off? How is it going to be really make your professional life better when becoming a teacher is in itself already hard? We also need to consider the coordinators and the resources that are given to coordinators. This is going to be one of our prominent as well policy recommendations. There is a need to professionalize the position, to make it permanent, to make it protected, and that happens with mechanisms such as release time, a voice in governance, connections and networking, so that these positions actually have a strength built in that makes it not subject to changing political winds or to organizational readjustments. We also count on reform of the assessments. Clearly, we have our conceptions in the field about what counts as language are evolving. We have seen new ways of conceiving language that are more like flexible, fluid, as we have seen with translanguaging. And that also leads to reconceptualizing what are the speakerhood models that we have in our community. In that regard, in the same way that it was done with other assessments in the past, such as RICA, we would need to consider doing an equity audit of the CC3, and with an emphasis as well on how Asian languages or least commonly taught languages are given access to the profession through these on the one hand necessary, but on the other hand, are they fairly necessary? Are they, in fairness, working as a way of elevating the profession or actually keeping it down? So we need to consider the potential of expanding course-based and clinical practice-based alternatives to the testing. We also want to build placements. Programs are struggling everywhere with how do we work with districts in making sure that we have placements. And important to consider, it's not just about quality placements, it's just placements. But then we should also be concerned about placements where there is actually quality, so that the first steps of those who have chosen to go the extra mile as bilingual teachers are not marred by unwanted situations when placements are simply not that vetted. They are just the placements that we have. So that would actually be tremendously reinforced if we have more data with this idea of the bilingual clinical placement registry. Also supporting cooperating teachers and dignifying their service to the profession with stipends, and also obviously as part of providing incentives along the way to the districts and the personnel in districts who make these placements happen in connection with the bilingual authorization programs. Then we ultimately we want to be connected to policy, and one of the ways of professionalizing and institutionalizing the bilingual teacher pipeline, it is actually to create committees, statewide committees, where the stakeholders are actually represented. Coalition building is so important to really make this reality of multilingualism for all. Because without the bilingual teacher educators, there will not be multilingualism for all. I mean, that's one thing that we must wrap our heads around. And that takes us to section 5, policy recommendations. These are some of the suggestions that we are humbly presenting to you as this is what can change the situation. Because, I mean, and this is, I'll mention this as a personal note. I am originally from Spain, and I came here 21 years ago because there was a bilingual teacher shortage. 21 years later, we are having the same conversations. We need to have a conversation to really change the game once and for all. And the first one is actually recognizing and resourcing coordinators. When we are thinking about the requirements that the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, or that the different grants that are being offered, when we think about how the conditions are set to obtain those grants or to actually certify as a bilingual authorization provider, mandate that there is a release time. And mark here that I'm mentioning specific a number for a full-time equivalent position of a job. And that's because among coordinators, one of the struggles is how much are you being given to coordinate? In many cases, it's nothing. In others, it's like 0.1. In others, it's 0.3. The number of inequities across the field erodes the capacity of the fields to work together with these differences among coordinators. Coordinators should be further professionalized by giving voting and a voice on governance committees when it comes to what is happening in their departments. Therefore, there should be also a statewide coordinator network which counts on CDE supports, and also that it is really a coalition of the different bodies in the state that are making this happen. It has to be really, really, really statewide. Now for recommendation number 2, Clara.
So thank you, Eduardo. It's funny you mentioned that you came here, you said 20 years ago or 21 years ago, and you had the same problem then that you have now. I came to this country also originally from Spain, like you, 33 years ago for the same problem, and we still have a shortage of bilingual teachers. So that shows the depth of the structural problem in the state of California. So recommendation number 2 is really looking at a sustained funding architecture. And the reason why we're using this language, architecture, is because this cannot be a hit and miss. This cannot be a trial and error. This cannot be just at the whim of whoever is in a political office at the time. There has to be an architecture that sustains over time, that creates institutional capacity, an institutional capacity fund that would allow to fund faculty lines with tenure and permanent status, that would allow to fund release time that is measurable and equitable, and it is obviously comparable across IHEs and LEAs, because let's not forget that we also have some county office of education preparing bilingual teachers and multilingual teachers. And there should also be some attention placed to the notion of exam waivers. So that's all part of an institutional capacity fund that we are recommending that we seriously look at. In terms of candidate incentive fund, this is beyond the institutional capacity fund. We would like to recommend that there would be a fund of $1,500 per month stipends, that there would be a system of loan forgiveness to candidates that commit to a 3-year teaching commitment in the districts that are hard to staff and hard to staff. And so we're looking at a system that goes beyond episodic grant funding. We're looking at a system that has a multi-year architecture that allocates and appropriates funding for others, years to come. So I would like to ask my colleague, okay, let me see. Dana, would you be so kind to go to recommendation 3? Thank you.
Thank you. In recommendation 3, we're asking you to consider reforming clinical practice infrastructure. And there are 3 areas to think about. First, create a statewide bilingual clinical placement registry. This could alleviate the problem of lack of quality bilingual placements in the state. And it would allow access to placements of caliber for student teachers' fieldwork, regardless of their region. Second, cooperating teachers should be recognized and incentivized for their mentoring with stipends. And third, for the CDE grant competitions established by the California State Legislature, we recommend prioritizing districts that expand their capacity for multilingual and bilingual student teaching placements. For recommendation 4, I'll pass it to Nirmala.
Thank you, Dana. It's interesting when Clara and Eduardo mentioned about them coming here to the United States while there was a teacher shortage. I also came into that picture 30 years ago when I came from the Philippines. And even now, we still have a teacher shortage. So with this, we want to give you this recommendation for connect coordinators to the state policy. And one of the realities many of us experience is this: policies are often written about bilingual teacher preparation without enough input from the people who are actually doing the day-to-day work of preparing bilingual educators. And that's where this recommendation becomes so important. The proposal is to formalize a coordinator policy council, a rotating body of bilingual authorization coordinators. Yeah, we do not see the slide. But I'll keep going until we have the slide here. I'm not sure where the slide is, but anyway, we are proposing a formal coordinator policy council, a rotating body of bilingual authorization coordinators and preparation leaders who would be consistently consulted on CTC rulemaking, legislation, and budget proposals that affect multilingual teacher preparation. Not occasionally, not after decisions are already made, but as part of the policy-making process itself. And we think this matters because coordinators sit at a unique intersection in our system. They hear directly from candidates struggling through credentialing requirements. They work with district partners trying to hire bilingual teachers. They navigate implementation challenges inside universities, and they see in real time where policy intentions and institutional realities do not always align. So in many ways, coordinators are the translators between policy and practice. So when we talk about strengthening California's multilingual educator pipeline, we cannot afford to leave the experts on the sidelines, namely the bilingual coordinators. What we appreciate about this recommendation is that it also models collaboration across organizations that have historically carried this work together, like CABTE, Californians Together, CABE, and CDE, California Department of Education Multilingual Support Division. Each of these organizations brings a different lens: teacher preparation, advocacy, community engagement. And if California is serious about Global California 2030, then we need systems where practitioner expertise continually informs policy decisions. And at the end of the day, this recommendation is really about shared ownership, not policy created in isolation, not implementation left entirely to institutions, but a genuine partnership between the state, universities, advocates, and educators working toward the same goal: a stronger, more sustainable multilingual teacher pipeline for California's students. Now, for our last recommendation, I'll hand it over to Clara to talk about our 5th recommendation.
Thank you, Nevla. Thank you. So our recommendation 5 is really straightforward. It's an overhaul of the CSET assessment pathways. This is a strong and a very assertive recommendation based on multiple interviews we've held with all of the participants of our study. We are actually asking for an independent equity audit of CSET Subtest 3 and Asian language exams. We need to see how developmentally appropriate they are or not. We need to see if they're based on measures of language proficiency that have nothing to do with being a bilingual teacher or a multilingual teacher. We need to really understand what is the developmental appropriateness of Asian language-based proficiency exams as well as Spanish. We know that we have a great problem with access when it comes to heritage speakers that are not able to pass the CSET Subtest 3, when indeed we know that in many occasions these heritage speakers would be wonderful bilingual and multilingual teachers in the classroom. So we need to really seriously look at an equity audit of the CSET Subtest 3. Additionally, we're proposing that the BA in Spanish, a BA in Spanish in the United States, should suffice to create a full Subtest 3 waiver. And this BA in Spanish should be enough for multiple subject candidates, single subject candidates, and ed specialist candidates. We really need to see that a BA in Spanish in the United States has value and it should be used as a measure to waive Subtest 3. We're also asking the field to consider the notion that many of our candidates spend 600 hours in their bilingual student teaching placements. Now, these 600 hours are being supervised by a site support provider or a cooperating teacher or a mentor teacher. They're being supervised by a university provider, by a university support provider, by a university cooperating supervisor. And therefore, the students are having to demonstrate for 600 hours together with all of the documentation, their use of proficiency, their use of Spanish in the context of the bilingual classroom, of the dual language immersion classroom, of a multilingual setting. So our recommendation 5 is looking at a overhaul of the CSET assessment pathways and really create other alternatives such as a BA in Spanish and or utilizing clinical practice 600 hours. In the case of bilingual interns, they can complete up to 950 hours, and that should give us enough data to understand that they're using proficiency in a contextualized manner for professional purposes. And with that, I'm going to ask my colleague Eduardo to continue. I cannot move the slide. There is no way for me to move the slide here. So thank you. So can you please continue, Eduardo? Thank you.
Yes, now this is the time where we are wrapping up our presentation today, and we want to kind of sum up some of the things that we have said. But we also want to bring together what most certainly is gathering us here today, which is the enthusiasm, the belief that multilingual education is the best that you can possibly get out of public education, and also what can make a change and a difference for the better in our society. 2030 is around the corner. That's how we started this project. Initially started calling it like beyond halfway to 2030, meaning it was 2025. It already feels like, hey, we are already starting to see the goal line at the end. Where are we? And we had lights and shadows in that regard. And of course, we want to end on the side of the lights, of the accomplishments, but still not losing sight from what remains to be done, because basically we all here today want to make 2030 not just a number that we've been citing in our reports and our articles and our presentations for a number of years since 2018, but really something that was a catalyst for change. So what we are proposing is that coordinators have built something remarkable with almost nothing. Please, let's give them the same commitment in return. So they are already there. They are established. They are a reality. Let's give them the support that they need by professionalizing and institutionalizing them to continue building something stronger. That building something stronger requires as well funding structurally. Protect and elevate the coordinators that run it. That means let's avoid the one-time funding episodes and let's go into something that is recurring, trustworthy, from soft money to hard money. And that also should be channeled as well towards the bilingual candidates who are making the choice whether to be or not to be a bilingual teacher. Ultimately, consider that all these changes operate as a collective, reforming assessment, building placements and building placement directories, collecting data, connecting coordinators to policy. This vision needs infrastructure now, something that is there to last. So these are our recommendations for making 2030 mean something. We want to make a specific acknowledgement of the Silver Giving Foundation for making this study possible. And not just on the financial matter, but also on the thinking matter, on pushing our ideas for wanting to think outside of the box and create an approach and support new organizations like CABTE in making new visions a reality. Our generous reviewers also yet deserve a recognition. Lindsay Bird, Lupita Cortez Alcalá, Karen Escalante, Reina Garcia Ramos, Gina Garcia Smith, Diane Kitamura, Claudia Martinez, Alicia Moreno, Chris Nichols, Carola Oliva Olson, John Pascarella, Malia Rambler, Fernando Rodriguez Valls, Priti Sangani, Lucrecia Santibáñez, Duarte Silva, Alison Smith, Minhie Son, and Kip Telles and Natalie Tran. All their thoughts and their energy is channeled in this report. Thank you so much, and now we are ready to open for questions and answers.
There is a question in the Q&A from Sandra Cephas, and I will read it. In San Diego County Office of Education, we are interested in supporting CTE pathways for bilingual teachers starting in high school that would be connected to both community colleges and four-year universities. Potential students might include bilingual students who acquire the second language at home and students from dual language programs. We are aware that there might be potential for funding through AB 2325. My question is, how can county offices better prepare to support this vision and make it a reality?
This is a very complex question, and it's almost like $1 million question. But one of the things that is really puzzling me as I'm seeing these sort of initiatives, like what's happening with 2325, and also with grants that have been given in order to promote this sort of pipeline, is how are the skills of being a bilingual teacher going to be systematized, sort of like a curriculum, or like broken down into pieces in a way that the pathway that goes from high school through community college and into the profession, actually those skills get addressed in a systematic pathway. I think that's something that needs to be charted out. And the one component that would connect actually with what we are presenting today, without coordination, without somebody on the ground that's going to be doing the recruitment, the advising, the supporting the candidates in the tough moments, that is not going to happen. So this idea of making this new option, or this kind of innovative way of thinking from high school to becoming a bilingual teacher, was going to happen in the middle. It needs to be on solid foundation, and that's going to require a lot of coordination. Those are my 2 cents. Perhaps some of my colleagues would like to add thoughts to
There,
that.
there is another question, but Clara, did you want to?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I believe that the landscape of preparation of bilingual teachers obviously is changing and is shifting in a very positive way. As you know, we have the bilingual teaching performance expectations that have helped us streamline and bring quality across the state in a sort of a more normative way, right? But I think what is important for us to understand is, so how are we, what are the outcome measures that we're looking for in the preparation of an effective bilingual teacher? And so how is this, if we were to backward map it, how is it going to be backward mapped to high school age students that are working on their seal of biliteracy? And they might go into a community college for a 2 year and then transfer into a 4 year. Are we looking at a blended program? Are we looking at a bachelor's blended program that offers a multiple subject and a bilingual authorization, or a single subject and a bilingual authorization that doesn't have to go into a 5th year? It can actually be managed at 4 years. And so I think this is a really good conversation in terms of the trajectory of a high school student that has a certain, that has a developmental level of maturity, and then how they move into community college and a 4 year. The BTPs is definitely a start, but it's definitely not all conclusive. And we know that, for example, TP7, which has been added to the preparation of base credentials, does not really integrate bilingualism or multilingualism. So that's a whole other conversation that we would need to have about it. But thank you for that question. Excellent question. Maybe that's another research study. How about that?
There is a question from Reyes Quesada. Where do the LEAs fit regarding advocacy?
They fit all over the place. I mean, clearly because they are ultimately where the bilingual teachers are going to be serving, and part of our recommendations are also emphasizing the fact that we need to collect data and we need to systematize the bilingual placements for clinical practice, and that is some work that also is the point of partnership between the BILIA providers or the teacher credentialing programs and the LEA. So it is also important to recognize their work and also to incentivize that the work that the LEAs are doing. In that regard, we should proceed together as an ecology. The one part that we do want to accentuate with our report is that often monies have been allocated based on Prop 98, and they have gone to the LEAs, but there has been no incentive, no significant incentive to bilingual authorization programs in the form of grants or the form of any sort of anything beyond being part of consortia that have the bilingual the teacher credentialing program as a partner, but never as a lead or a direct recipient of funds. That said, the LEAs, they have the numbers, and they part of what we need to consider right now, and is part of that bigger data, is how many bilingual dual language programs do we have in the state? What programs are being developed, and what would take to actually take it to the next level beyond just having one or two per district. In some districts, they don't have any programs yet. So, I mean, it's also part of an interesting study that needs to be done.
There's another question on the chat, I think from Tracy Villanova. There is a suggestion to give student loan forgiveness for 3 years if BILA teachers are in a needy district. Sometimes it takes a while for a BILA teacher, a number of years, to actually land a job in a dual language school. So I'm wondering how this could be tracked. Any thoughts from the team?
I'd like to offer my comments on this. Tracy, thank you for this question. This was actually part of one of the interviews that I did with a representative from CDE. And one of the challenges that we are facing right now is the data tracking. At this point in time, when teacher candidates graduate or finish a program, it's hard for us to keep track, or it's hard to look at the data of who finished and where they go and what they're doing. And so part of this challenge is that for us to collaborate with CDC, CTC coordinators, CTC state leaders, as well as CDE, California Department of Education. And so we have to be vigilant and at the same time be more aware of how we can definitely track this, because this is one of the areas where we can definitely help our teacher candidates in terms of student loan forgiveness. And that will actually incentivize a lot of our bilingual teachers to get into the workforce as soon as they know that their student loan can be forgiven. So Tracy, thank you for this help, and maybe another study that we can look into. So thank you for that.
We also have in the Q&A recommendation the creation of an updated statewide directory of all programs, what language 50/50, 90/10 would be incredibly helpful as well. I mean, clearly what this is pointing is to a recommendation that we have from multiple angles. We need more data and systematically collected. Problem is that every time that you are saying we need to collect data, somebody needs to be in charge of the spreadsheet and somebody needs to be collecting the information, and that requires resources. However, without data, we are going around without a compass. Manuel, I think that you wanted to also mention something about that.
I echo what you said about collecting data. So fully support that recommendation.
There is another question in the chat by Diane Sharkin Taboada. This is excellent and needed research. Are there plans for research participants to engage in, collaborate with, helping to follow up on the excellent follow-up suggestions? Has there been any response from the state regarding their plans on bilingual authorization issues?
I guess this is also part of what CABTE can do, CABTE in collaboration with Californians Together. And I think that a critical step is to find how these recommendations are coming together with the fabric of multilingualism for all, given that in multilingualism for all, the centrality of the bilingual teacher pipeline is clearly foregrounded in the white paper.
There's a comment made by Dr. Natalie Tran. She mentioned, would like to emphasize the important role that universities, IHEs, play in the process of preparing bilingual teacher education, infrastructure, instruction, fieldwork placement, accreditation, accountability, etc. We can't agree with you more, Natalie, on this because we are continuously looking into how IHCs can play a significant role in partnerships with LEAs in terms of what you've mentioned about infrastructure and instruction. So the whole partnership idea is a key to this process. So thank you, Natalie.
I wanted to follow up on the point that Diane made about are there plans for research participants to engage and collaborate? And so CABTE has an important role here to play, and we are a coalition partner of Californians Together and many others. And Californians Together is leading a statewide campaign on multilingual education for all. So the timing is great. The time is now, and we need to kind of look at how are these recommendations being disseminated, how are they being processed by CTC, CDE, by universities, by County Office of Education. So we have some work to do, Diane. We have some work to do. This is our first official webinar where we're actually sharing all of our findings with the public. But I think that your question is important and is timely. And as president of CABTE, I can tell you that we will continue to engage and exchange ideas and find solutions. These recommendations should not just be on paper. We need to make them actionable items that will impact people's lives.
Okay, we are realizing that we are at 12:59 and we are coming right on time to the hour. And we want to again appreciate everyone being here and thanking as well the partnership between CalTalk and CABTE in making this happen. and the positive energy and the desire of multilingualism for all that everybody is bringing that we see in the chat. We are really inspired by your presence here, and you know that all of us here in the panel and the research team, and you are gonna find us on the road to make this happen. So let's make it happen. Thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you for choosing to be with us.